Hello. Today I'm going to show you how to copy a disk image or an image file to an actual physical disk using Linux. So I'm going to be copying the Raspbian operating system, the image that you download from the Raspberry Pi website, onto a micro SD card. To do that, I'm going to use Linux Mint Desktop, or it's based on Ubuntu. So right now, what you're seeing is my Ubuntu desktop, or the command line for Ubuntu desktop. And the first thing that I need to do is figure out what disks are already installed in my computer. I don't want to override any data that's for one of my permanent disks, so I need to run sudo, which basically gives me kind of super user access or administrative access to access all of the disks. And then I want to list the disks using a utility called fdisk, and we use the switch -L, and the fdisk utility is a utility that handles disk management, and L means list. Now, if I just run that directly, it's going to give me a lot of extra information that I don't necessarily need. So I'm going to also run sudo fdisk, and then I'm going to pipe this kind of up and down bar, we call it a pipe. I'm going to pipe that output into another program called grep. So sudo fdisk-l grep, and grep is a search utility tool used for searching. And I'm going to grep or search for /dev. And what this will do is basically filter out all of these lines and only show me the ones that contain /dev, because they're the ones that I'm interested in. So in this case, instead of getting all of the extra text, we just have only the devices, the lines with devices shown. So here we have disk dev SDA, which is my first physical disk, and dev SDA1, which is my first partition or my first logical disk on dev SDA. So using this, I can see that I have four disks built in right now. So I have these 4 physical disks, and I have one partition on each physical disk. So I want to make sure I do not touch any of these whenever I'm copying my data down. And then I have also these virtual drives, but I don't need to worry about those so much. I also don't want to modify them, obviously, but I'm really interested more in my physical disks. So now that I know what physical disks I have in my system, I'm going to insert my micro SD card into the computer. And then a window pops up because it had a file system already. So if I run the command again, then you'll see we've added disk dev mmc blk0, which is 16 gigabytes, which is what I would expect. Okay, so I know that that is the disk that I've just inserted. It's what I want to run to. It currently has a FAT32 file system and one partition. We're going to wipe this partition out, so I don't care about that. I'm very interested only in this dev mmc block 0. Okay, so now we need to go find our disk image that we're going to copy to this. I'll put a link to all the Raspberry Pi disk images in the information bar, but this will work with any physical disk image. Sometimes you might get a logical disk image, but we're dealing with a physical disk image now, so we're going to copy it directly to the physical device. So in this case, I'm going to use a program. First off, I need to use sudo to get super user permissions to be able to write to the disk. I'm going to use a program called dd. And what dd does is copy at the bit level from the disk image to the physical disk. So dd makes its copies at the bit level, and that's what we're looking for here. And then I have my input interface. My input interface, I say if equals, and if means my input interface. And my disk image is called 2016 0318 Raspbian Jessie. And if you notice, whenever I was typing, I just typed 2016 and a dash. And because the only file name that I have in my downloads folder that starts with 2016 dash is my image, whenever I type the first part of the name, if I hit tab, then tab will autocomplete the file name. So if you're not using that, I really recommend starting to use tab to autocomplete all of your lines. So now we have our input interface. So I want to input this disk image into DD, right? Then DD needs a place to output it to. So our next part of this is output interface equals, or OF equals, and then I need to give it where I want to copy the data to. So in this case, I want to copy the data to /dev/mmcblk0. Okay, remember mmcblk0 in my case is my micro SD card that I just inserted. So here we have administrator privileges, use DD, the input interface is my disk image, my output interface, or OF, equals my the actual physical micro SD card, not a partition. So I do not want to put, for example, P1. We are not looking for that. We are looking for only the physical disk itself. Okay. And if I hit enter right now, then DD would go ahead and copy that image directly. However, DD does not report on how much data has been written, which is fine. If you don't care about monitoring it, then you can just run that command and it will work just fine. I normally use that, but I'm also going to show you another tool that is exactly like DD with a few more features built in, and it's called DCFL DD. DCFL DD, like I said, has a few more features than DD, but most importantly, it will tell you how much data has been written to the disk already. So it's very good for keeping track of when something is going to be done. You have to install DCFL DD separately. It is in the apt repository. DD is normally built in to most Linux and Unix systems. So I'm going to run now sudo DCFL DD, or just DD, IF equals, and that's the input interface, and then OF equals, and that's the output interface. So what I'm copying, what I will copy, and where I will copy it to. Okay, so now I'm going to press enter, and then it starts usually very quickly, and it will slow down pretty quickly as well. Actually, that's going faster than I expected. Okay, so because I'm using DCFL DD, then I could see this kind of blocks written and the amount of data written. If you just use DD, you won't see that, but once it's finished, you will see this overall records in and overall records out. Okay, so now we can just eject our micro SD card, and that's it. You should have Raspbian installed on the card and ready to boot up in your Raspberry Pi. Thanks for watching. If you liked that video, subscribe for more.